Did you know that there are artists out there right now who are posting consistently every single day and have great music, but are still not seeing results? I mean, how can that be, right? Everyone's saying that if I have great music and I post consistently, that those are the two magic pills that'll make a music career out of it. Well, unfortunately, that's not the truth, right? We've been sold kind of a bill of false goods on that front. But there's some nuance and truth here where sometimes you'll see people who have good music and are posting consistently, they'll have success. And you'll see another musician who's posting consistently, has good music, and is not seeing success. So there's a difference that's happening between these two approaches, and no one's really talking about it, okay? So everyone tries to start blaming the algorithm. They start blaming the fans themselves, saying, well, people just don't have good taste anymore. They just like crap or whatever. What if they never saw the content? Or worse off, what if they did see the content and it just didn't connect? Right? How do we fix that problem? And how are other artists doing it so that it actually creates a connection? And other artists are doing it and it's leaving us, with no results and no growth, right? So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how you can start to create content that actually connects. Because people think, oh, consistency is the key for content. And in my opinion, connection is the key for content. Posting consistently can improve your odds. I want you to think about it like this. Every single social media platform is like a pond, like a freshwater pond, right? And so what you're doing is you're sitting here at this crossroads where all these platforms are just right in front of you in different ponds. And so every time you post a piece of content, you're throwing a line. You're a fisherman, right? You're throwing a line out there so that hopefully one of those videos will take off and you'll get a bite and all of a sudden you'll go viral, right? That's sort of the mindset. So, of course, the more lines that you cast out into each pond, the better opportunity you have to connect with somebody if, and the big if, you have content that actually resonates with them. So let's break this down. What are the things that we need to do to ensure that people don't have any resistance or as much resistance when they consume our content, but better yet, create a connection that actually builds them some kind of affinity towards us as artists? So the first thing is readability/visibility. Now that I said that in pairs because I mean two different things. The first thing is, let's talk about visibility, right? We all know that if we have a piece of content that is like 120p quality, it looks like it was filmed on a toaster and then published to YouTube in 2006, that video is not going to get hardly any traction. Why? Because no one can tell what the heck's going on in the video. It looks like pixels battling each other in the war of the pixels or something. No one can tell what's going on, so they're immediately scrolling, right? But what if you start thinking to yourself, but Dax, no, that's not my case. I don't have too low quality of content. I've got super, super high def quality content. I would say that's good, but that might be working against you depending on how you're using it. So here's the analogy that I've given my clients many, many times over, which is think about YouTube when it very first started out, right? 2006, 2005, whenever, everyone was posting videos, but they were all pretty low-fi, right? It was all 360p-ish quality videos. But then, towards the late 2000s, right into the 2010s, there was a shift where higher quality videos started to come out, and that started to break the pattern of everything on YouTube is just like your viral lo-fi videos to high quality, not performances, but well, I guess in that case it could be performances. Like I remember Guitar Man or Guitar Mystery Man who had all these like, what are those called? Stop motion videos with the guitar. I remember that kind of stuff was really cool. But high quality content started becoming the pattern interrupt. So everyone started going, whoa, I want to check out what's going on over here. Well, then what happened? Marketers, media, everybody got in on it, right? Everyone started figuring out that the higher quality videos they had, it was putting more eyeballs on them. So they started having more higher quality content. And then that became the norm because now everyone's got a spaceship for a phone. And so you literally have super high def quality cameras by default for everybody. So that became the norm. So when people started seeing super highly produced stuff, there was two things that happened. If it was presented in a certain way, people would immediately have skepticism to it because they would assume you were about to sell them something. However, you look at this and you think, okay, well, good quality shouldn't result in bad views. Here's what I typically see. if you have a good following, like you've got 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 subscribers on any one of your channels and you're posting high quality content, to the consumer's mind, that tracks, right? You've got a whole bunch of views, you got this big audience, you got this fancy camera, that all makes sense. However, if you're just starting out, you got 150, followers on Instagram or whatever, and you're posting this super, super high def content, sometimes there's a disconnect in the prospect's brain where they're kind of like, wait a second, like, why do you have all this high quality stuff but not very many views? Something must be going on here. So it's like a reverse social proof in a sense where, you think about in real estate, if you see a house that's been on the market for 3 days, you're like, oh man, it's only been on the market for 3 days. It's just, hot off the press. We better hop on this. However, if a house has been sitting on the market for like 2 years, and so the days on market on the listing says like 700 plus, people are going to be like, why is no one buying this? It's social proof in reverse, right? So that can kind of happen if you have high quality content but not a lot of engagement or views. That can sort of work in the opposite direction sometimes. So what's the answer, Dax? Really, content quality isn't the make or break. It's the first step, right? We need them to be able to see what exactly it is we're doing. So have the quality good enough that, like, if you're filming a rehearsal or something, the lighting is good enough that people can actually see you playing your instrument, right? They're not just like, what's going on? They're trying to decipher your video because they're honestly not going to put the effort in to do that. Most people won't. They'll just scroll. When the effort to understand your content is stronger than the effort of moving their thumb up, they are just going to move their thumb up every single time, okay? So readability. What do I mean by readability? So when it comes to the text hooks, the headlines that we put on the videos to make people like, oh, what's going on here? A lot of times I'll see people put them out there and they're hard to read, either because they're like super massive or there's no background to really discern the text from the video. So you really just have to work harder to read the text. And again, like I said, if you have to work hard to consume the content, people will just do the easier path, and that's push their thumb up. So make your text hooks have a background, right? I've talked about this with like a handful of my clients recently, is make the hooks have a background so that they really pop and they stick out from the background. Plus, if you're just using the captions and the backgrounds that are naturally there inside of the app, they look more like a post from a user than a sponsored post from some big ad or corporation, right? Which causes skepticism. So we don't really want to do that. So we want to create this more casual environment. And in my opinion, having the visibility right and the readability right is the first step to creating that sort of casual connection atmosphere of your video. So that's not to say that high quality doesn't mean you can't connect, but we have to be concerned about if we have too much production and not any meat behind the production, which is what we're about to go into now. So the next thing is your avatar. What is that? That's a term in business that we use to describe what are the traits, personality, who is this person that you're trying to make music for or sell a product to? That's what an avatar is. So we have to identify for ourselves and our own projects, who is the ideal fan avatar? What are their demographics, right? You can go to Spotify for artists, your Apple Music for artists, or whatever, and you can go start to scour that data and figure out what are the average age ranges, what are the predominant age ranges that my music is excelling in, what are the predominant places around the world, what's the predominant gender? Do I lean like more female, more male? Is it 50-50? Like, where does that fall, right? You have to start looking at the data that Spotify and Apple will give you and start identifying, okay, where is my music really excelling in? Then we start to look at something called psychographics, right? These are like, what are the things that they're into? What's the cultural language and ideas that they'll have in their head on any given day? Think about like metal music, because I come from the rock and metal zone of the music industry. What happens is we have a lot of these like anti-mainstream thoughts, right? So if I'm trying to dig into the psychographics and think like a metalhead, right? I need to start thinking about like anti-establishment, anti-authority, highly individualistic types of things, right? Because that's the culture, that's the language that they're using while they're in this niche, they're in this culture. So you want to start speaking the same kind of language obviously, I think that will honestly be easier for most people than it sounds like that I'm describing, because you just take a look at how you behave. Most likely, you are a fan of the niche that you are trying to excel in, so you know already a lot about the cultural norms, ideas, attitudes, behaviors that people get into. And that leads me to the other thing, which is, what are your fans' behaviors? To me, this is crucial as we start to identify content hooks and other things in our music business, which is, what are they doing on a day-to-day basis? What are the problems, the trials, the tribulations that they go through on any given day? Because ultimately, people care about the things that move them towards pleasure or away from pain, okay? And so if our content can be a way for them to pursue what they view as pleasurable or to escape what they view as painful, that will start to create some curiosity within them, because we're actually touching on the things that matter to them, right? Like most people right now, if I was betting, they would actually be more in the escape pain camp than they would be the pursue pleasure camp, right? The pursue pleasure camp, that's like the people that have big aspirations and they want to do X, Y, and Z, right? We can speak to those people. So for example, if you do like pop music, a lot of people in the pop scene think that they're going to do great things one day, and they have this very hopeful attitude. And I'm not saying yay or nay about it. I'm just describing the actual behaviors and attitudes of the scene. So if you're creating pop music, you want to create this sort of, I'm pursuing pleasure because, we're going to live forever, I'm going to be young forever and nothing can stop us and we're going to take over the world. That's sort of the youthful mentality of pop music, right? You look at the mentality of metal music. It's like, we're going to stand against authority. We're going to be individuals. Even if people look down on us, we're going to stand by our stripes, and et cetera, et cetera. You look at country fans. It's like, I believe I'm very into, the country, the nation, right? I'm into blue collar things. I like to, chill back and have sort of a redneck kind of life. And I can say that because I live in Oklahoma and some of those people are my family. So I can say that. But you get the idea. Every single one of our cultures that, genres that we inhabit have certain beliefs, certain behaviors, certain patterns that we want to start speaking to. Because now we're going to be speaking on things they actually care about, as opposed to trying to look cool. This is something I've talked about before, where artists, we get too caught up in our persona and trying to look cool. I hope people look at this and think I'm super cool, as opposed to, I hope that they're going to connect with this piece of content. Because when you're thinking about that, you're going to come across way more authentic, right? Sometimes people think that they're like go-getter, nothing will ever stop me type attitude is showing people like, oh, here's my personality. I'm like, that's, to me, I would say that's not always being authentic, right? Sometimes there's times to be optimistic. Sometimes there's time just to be chill. Sometimes it's like, okay, it makes sense why I'm angry. So I think when you look at it, you have to look at it like this. If I'm going to be out here posting content, I want to be doing it in such a way that I'm not just trying to bolster my ego and bolster my sense of self. I want to speak to somebody. And when I focus on the connection, because I know what they're going through, because I've identified who my dream fan avatar is, I can now start to create messages that match the market that I'm trying to speak to, right? Dan Kennedy, a classic direct response marketer, says one of the most powerful things in marketing is finding a message to market match, okay? For example, if I'm a Taylor Swift fan who is upset about my most recent breakup that I've had, then, sorry to stereotype, but if, I'm getting out of a relationship or whatever and I'm having this breakup issue, the message of metal musicians of like, speak to your own, be yourself and don't worry if people call you freaks or whatever because they don't understand and conformity and blah, 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 right? Like those messages and markets don't really match, right? That's like if you were holding two positive ends of a battery together, or of a magnet together, they would start to like push against each other. Where if I was to say something like, okay, I have the Taylor Swift demographic person, and then I come over here with a message that's like, don't you worry, girl, you're super powerful and you can overcome this breakup. They're like, oh, this is a perfect match for me. I love this. Why? Because the message to market match is there. That is where a lot of people are falling flat when it comes to their content, in my opinion. I think it comes down straight up to our lack of ability to find the message that matches with the desired market that we're trying to attract as our fan base. Okay? So how do we start to dial that in? That leads us to the thing that we need to close the video up with today, which is the headline. Now, what's the headline? I usually use the term hook, but a lot of people are like, they're songwriters. So when I throw the term hook out there, they think of like the chorus. They think, they think of the hook of the song, which that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to a marketing term, which is a hook, something that gets someone's attention. I'm going to start from here on, from hence day forth, I'm going to call that the headline, because that is, in marketing terms, what it is. You guys are learning how to speak more entrepreneurialese. Your marketing, when you're doing let's say an advertisement, there's a headline, right? If you ever do an article that goes into an advertisement, there's a headline. With music content, that piece of text that overlays the video at the very first 3 to 5 seconds of the video is the headline for the video. Okay, so how do we start to improve our headlines so that we can have more of a message to market match? Okay, well, the first thing that we need to dive into is, again, the dream fan avatar. So if there's a specific idea floating around your specific niche or community, let's say, I'm trying to think of a real obvious example. Country is just what's coming to my mind because I live in Oklahoma and I hear about it all the time. I remember, and I'm not making a statement either way, I'm just objectively stating what happened. So apparently, like, Jason Aldean made a song about, like, being proud of living in a small town, and it had some, people thought it had other implications. Again, I'm not going into all that. But the point is, he spoke to his prime demographic in a way that got them to sort of like, oh my gosh, that resonates with what I feel. Again, you can think what you want about whatever, but the marketing principle remains true. He put out a piece of content, he put out a song with a message, and fundamentally the title of the song is like a headline, if you think about it like that. Now, I'm not saying when you're creating a song you need to be thinking like that. I'm saying once the song is created and it's already finished and wrapped up and there's a nice bow on it, now you can start looking at it from a marketing lens because you've already done the authentic art creation. Just a little subtle nuance there, but it's an important one, right? You're not making songs from a marketing perspective. You're figuring out all the marketing applications of your song after it's created. Okay, just a little aside there. So we need to figure out how we can speak to that dream fan avatar, right? So in country, there was a lot of people that had this idea of like, oh yeah, we'll try that in a small town. And so what did Jason Aldean do? He goes, I'm going to write a song called Try That in a Small Town. So he immediately spoke to his demographic audience, right? Think about Taylor Swift and the song Me. I think that one is pretty, ironically, that's actually really spot on. The song Me, it's all about them or me. Whoever me is, it's all about me, right? It's a very... sorry to throw shade, y'all, but it's kind of a self-centered concept, But for some reason, that really seemed to resonate with a particular demographic. Okay, but you get the idea. It sounds like I'm throwing shade at everybody today. I'm trying not to. But what I'm saying is, clearly, they understood who they are speaking to, who their audience is, and guess what? It really did well. There's tons of examples of this. I think Oliver Anthony was a guy who literally had a viral moment around one of his songs because of the lyrics created a hook, a headline that got people going, wow. And then the music and the scenario, everything matched. The visuals, the hook, the music, it was all a perfect trio. And of course, he blew up from there. My son's in there yelling. I love it. So we have to look at what are those things, those thoughts, those behaviors of my dream fan avatar, and how can I speak to those things, right? I'll just tell you right now, I've mentioned it in other videos, use this responsibly. Again, don't be a douche about it, but like us versus them marketing positioning can be very effective because you're getting people to rally around an idea, a cause that particular niche already believes in. So an easy example is that well, I guess you can't really say this nowadays because metal has kind of grown up. But back 10 years ago, it was a big deal for metal musicians to be like, pop music is super overproduced and metal is raw. And then what started happening is metal started becoming super produced. But here's the thing, I don't think high quality production is a bad thing. And I think metal people started to realize that having higher quality production was not in and of itself a bad thing. But there was a while there where there was marketing to be utilized around the rawness of a sound. Even if your sound was highly produced, if it had that raw sound, which basically meant no like synthesizers and no like electronic elements, it was just, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, maybe some classical instruments like violin. Outside that, though, if there was anything else in there, people would be like, it's too produced. That's just the words they used. But you get the idea. You're stepping into the mindset of the average fan of your given niche so that you can start to create headlines around what they're already talking about. So let's say you've got, people who are fans of old classic rock, right? Old rock and roll from like the 70s and the 80s. You could start playing on that nostalgia in your headlines and start saying, don't you miss when the music sounded like this? Boom. So let's say you have more of a classic rock kind of sound, but you're a modern act. You can utilize that positioning because your dream fans have that nostalgic longing for that sound, and you're a young person who loves that sound and appreciates it. And so you can provide a new adaptation, a new version of this kind of music in a modern context. What do? You speak to the people who already love it. Now, that's a few different ways that we can look at it, but here's one thing I would look at. With your headlines, you want to create a frame, okay? So a frame is creating the window to which they're going to see the rest of the content through, okay? You're creating a lens. That's why they call it a frame. You're creating the frame, the lens, the window that they're going to see through that filters how they see the content, right? Like, for example, if I saw, you could play one video. It reminds me of something else tangentially that's related to that, but you could play one video, but depending on what hook, what headline you threw over it, people will interpret what they're seeing differently. Like, if I said, if it was just like an image of a waitress going and picking up someone's check, and I said, wow, I can't believe she did that. So rude. And then you watch the video, you're looking for what's rude. And you're interpreting every action the waitress does as an intention to be rude because the context has now been centered around this frame of something rude has happened. Whereas the same video of a waitress just picking up someone's check, you go, wow, I can't believe she did this. She's so sweet. Now you're going to be watching the video like, what? Did she leave like something behind so that gave the customer a tip because they saw that the customer was in a bad position? You're going to be looking for the positive because the headline created a frame around it. So for us, we need to figure out what is the frame that I need to put around the visuals to make my music have perfect context and emotional impact with the video, right? So I'm going to say that again. I know that was kind of techie and involved. You need to make sure that your headline creates a frame that provides the context for a scenario, that's your visuals, that the music is the soundtrack for. So if you have a situation that your music can amplify, let's say you write I know I have someone out there who's an internet friend, his name's the Gosh Father. He does EDM dance music and it sounds great. It makes me feel like dancing, I'll tell you that. And I'm not a dancer. I'm the guy that dances I'm not a dancer at all. So he creates the frame when you're in the club and you just want to jump your life away. You just want to jump dance your life away and it's just whatever. That's creating a frame for a scenario being at the club that your music is the soundtrack for, okay? If I'm like a super heavy metal band, actually one of my clients, I'll kind of use one of their situations, which is like your boss pisses you off, So you get home and you just start jamming, right? So you have this footage of you jamming out like super aggressively, throwing kicks and all kinds of stuff. But depending on what caption or what hook headline I throw over that video, that's going to change the frame, right? So why not create a frame that takes my ideal prospect somewhere that they want to be in their state of mind so that I could create a situation that creates a message to market match, okay? So I know I'm going through the techniques of how you do this, right? But as you start to implement it, you're really going to have to think about these things. You're going to have to think about like, what's the frame from the headline that's going to create the context for the scenario that my music will be the soundtrack to. Hopefully that makes sense. So now when you go to create your content, you've got some frameworks to help you. You know that your hook is readable and that your visuals are watchable. People can discern what's happening in the video, but it's not super overproduced to the point where people are like, where's the substance in it? It's not production for the sake of production. Then you identify, who exactly am I going to create this content for? What are their thoughts, behaviors, their demographics, their psychographics? How can I actually start to speak to this person like a human being? And then number 3, how do I create the headlines that create that frame so that that video that I've created and the music that's the soundtrack to that video, I've created the perfect frame so that the filter they view the video through is one that will most easily make them receptive to the music. Okay? If you got a lot of value from today's video, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, all that good kind of YouTube-y stuff. We also have a free community that you can click the link in the description to join. It's a bunch of other entrepreneurial-minded musicians who are just trying to figure out what's going on in their music business and get help and get some progress going. So feel free to join that. It's a total free group. And if you'd like some one-on-one help, trying to create content that connects with your fan base and you feel like you need some one-on-one help, apply for a free coaching call. In the description, it'll just be to see if it's a good fit, if you want to work with us one-on-one. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on another video inside of Musicians Ignite. Take care.